I'm here today because gun violence is an epidemic that is claiming the lives of 1,500 Pennsylvanians each and every year, 1,500. It touches all of us, from daily shootings in our cities and towns to rising suicides in communities across the Commonwealth. I am keenly aware that any conversation about guns causes people to go to their corners and tune out. But what I'm here today to talk about is not something that's going to cause people to pick sides or weigh in with their ideology. It's simply about following the law in order to keep people safe. Following the law to keep people safe. As Attorney General, it is my responsibility to use my authority to fight back against this public health epidemic, which clearly knows no county borders. And so that's why I'm here in Erie today to launch the Office of Attorney General's Track and Trace initiative, a smart, data-driven approach to decreasing gun trafficking in Pennsylvania, to decrease illegal transfers, and to take crime guns out of neighborhoods across Pennsylvania. We hear so very little about the laws we already have on the books and whether they're being followed or enforced. Gun violence in Pennsylvania, no matter where you stand or sit on this issue, is a crisis. 1,500 Pennsylvanians die each and every year from guns. 520 of them are homicides, and a whopping 940 of them are suicides. 62% of those gun deaths in Pennsylvania each year are suicides. I'm committed to protecting the right of a parent who wants to legally own a gun to protect their home. But I'm also committed to protecting the right of a parent who wants to walk their child to school and not be in fear of getting shot on the street on their way. Pennsylvania simply cannot and should not endure this carnage. And we need an all-hands-on-deck approach to enforce the laws on the books and address the systematic and systemic issues that are fueling this crisis. So I fundamentally believe that law enforcement's mission cannot end with solving an individual gun crime. So it's not enough just to confiscate a gun from a crime scene and lock it away somewhere. We must trace the history of that gun to determine how it ended up in the hand of that criminal. A trace, and this is important, which is required under Pennsylvania law, shows us who first bought the gun and where they bought it from. It gives law enforcement an incredible amount of intelligence to assist us in our investigations. So this might reveal additional crimes that took place and uncover additional criminals who played a role in this gun's journey. And it could lead us to troves of other illegal guns that are out on the streets in our neighborhoods and trafficked throughout the Commonwealth. We know that crime guns recovered by police typically change hands multiple times after its first legal retail sale. Every serial number on a gun tells a story, and we are committed to finding out where these stories begin and hold people committing gun crimes accountable. So that is exactly why I'm back here in Erie today to announce Track and Trace and what it is designed to accomplish. The initiatives focus specifically on the responsibilities of 4 constituencies: law enforcement, gun retailers, consumers, and finally gun owners. The first step focuses on law enforcement's responsibility to collaborate and to enforce our existing laws and trace every gun. Pennsylvania law requires law enforcement to identify a firearms source with tracing information from the ATF. Yet most crime guns are actually not submitted to this shared law enforcement database. And because this information is not shared, we actually have no idea how many crime guns were recovered in Pennsylvania last year. And that makes us all less safe. I acknowledge, and by the way, you should know, we are one of the few states in the nation with this law. Yet we're not using it effectively to make Pennsylvanians safer. And by the way, I acknowledge that my office didn't always do this. In fact, when I first took over as Attorney General a bit more than 2 years ago, we weren't tracing our guns. But because we made this intelligence a top priority, we are now seeing the results by putting this data as required by law into the database. And now we want to work with other law enforcement across Pennsylvania to make sure that they do the same. Today, only about a third of our 1,200 law enforcement agencies actually input crime guns into the database as required by law, and then even less share the intelligence that's contained in that database. My office is committed to starting the conversations and visiting local police departments across our state to elevate the importance of this data entry and providing resources to uphold the laws on the books. The tracing of crime guns gives law enforcement a bird's eye view as to how these guns travel, how a gun is stolen from a hunting cabin in northwest Pennsylvania and ends up in a drug bust on the streets of Philadelphia. The second step of this initiative is to work with gun retailers to modernize their systems as they follow Pennsylvania law governing firearm sales. You see, Pennsylvania law requires retailers to submit a record of every firearm sale to the state police. Most retailers today use a paper record that then gets mailed to the state police and has to be entered into the computer manually. This adds time, it creates a backlog, and ultimately what it does for law enforcement is it holds up our investigations. Our systems of paper record of sale are outdated and create this unnecessary backlog. It inhibits the ability of law enforcement to quickly trace guns recovered at crime scenes, to determine where they were purchased and who purchased them. So my office will work with gun retailers across the state to increase the use of PSP's electronic record of sale system, a modern and smart tool that will allow law enforcement to quickly trace guns found at crime scenes or in the hands of criminals. The third step of this plan is working with consumers who also have a responsibility to prevent gun trafficking. They must understand the consequences of straw purchases when one individual buys a firearm for another individual who is unable to purchase a gun legally and then illegally transfers it. Every gun starts out as legal. An illegal transfer to a prohibited purchaser or a criminal is a violation of our laws. And these are serious crimes with serious consequences. Look, we all know that you can't go into a store and buy a six-pack of beer for an underage kid outside a local beer distributor here. But too few people know that buying a gun for a felon or a prohibited purchaser is a crime. And understand that under state law, 2 straw purchase guns comes with a 5-year mandatory sentence. So we will deploy our assets and engage citizens across our Commonwealth, educating them on these illegalities and the dangers of participating in this type of behavior. The fourth step of this plan is to call on responsible gun owners to protect their firearms from theft and from misuse. Pennsylvania has a rich tradition of gun ownership and sportsmanship, and I'm committed to protecting people's Second Amendment rights. But we need the public's help to ensure that guns are handled appropriately. Household guns that are not safely stored or left unlocked greatly increase the risk of suicide, of unintentional shootings, and of theft. And suicide is on the rise, as we know, in part due to the lack of safe storage. More than 4.5 million American children live in a home with access to unlocked, loaded guns. One result, 80% of child firearm suicides involve a family member's gun. Of all the deaths in Pennsylvania due to firearms, nearly two-thirds were suicides. This is especially a problem in rural Pennsylvania. A gun in the home increases the risk of suicide by firearm by a factor of 17. Gun theft is also prevalent. Stolen guns jumped 60% between 2000 and 2016. Prohibited purchasers are known to target gun owners for theft, hoping their guns aren't stored safely. This is dangerous, and we need responsible people here in Erie and all across Pennsylvania to join us and make sure that their guns are stored safely in their home. If tracing crime guns can prevent a mom from having to bury her child, one person from buying a gun on behalf of a criminal, or assist one agency in figuring out how guns in the community are ending up in the hands of criminals, then we have made real progress. The kind of progress that Pennsylvanians demand of us in law enforcement, to work together to address this public health and public safety crisis.